we can start.
Namaste, everyone. Global Brahmin community has decided to have another talk on a very important topic. And I'd first invite Adarshji to just tell us a little about the topic, and then we carry on with that. Adarshji, please introduce Global Brahmin and the topic also.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining. So the topic today that we chose is crumbling down the caste atrocity literature. So actually, we are seeing, nowadays, mostly in the social media and everywhere, that how Brahmins and how the upper caste, mainly the Brahmins, are targeted by putting fake atrocity literature that that is very much an exaggeration or full of lies. So even if we go to Sophia Pathan's book, the student of Balu sir, and so also historian Dharampal ji, so we can very easily find ki, these atrocity literature, these atrocities are mere exaggeration or lies, एंड वो जो राई का पहाड़ पहाड़ बनाना वो उस पे फिट बैठता है. सो इसी कारण से हम जो देख रहे हैं सोशल मीडिया पे बार बार इस एट्रोसिटीज को कि हमें पानी नहीं पीने दिया गया एंड गॉड नोज व्हाट सो इन चीजों का लाकर इट इज ऑलवेज पिन्ड अगेंस्ट ब्राह्मण्स की दीज आर द पीपल हु नीड्स टू रीपे. सो इट्स मोर देन किसी चीज, मोर देन वो जस्टिस वगैरह मांगने से ज्यादा इट्स लाइक कि भाई हमारे साथ ऐसा हुआ है हजारों साल से, जो पानी नहीं पीने दिया गया है, तो अब तो ब्राह्मण्स को भी ये करना होगा. ऑल्सो दिस इज नॉट लिमिटेड टू सिर्फ रिजर्वेशन एंड ये कि भाई ये दे दो हमें नौकरियां इतने दे दो, ये भी नहीं है, बट वो बेटियों तक भी पहुंच जाता है. इफ यू वांट टू मतलब just if you want to dilute these caste so-called caste discrimination, तो फिर आपको अपनी बेटियां हमारी तरफ बिहानी होगी. दिस इज अ रिमार्क दैट बहुत बार आप लोगों ने सुना होगा सोशल मीडिया. यहाँ तक कि सिर्फ ये लिमिटेड हमारे सिर्फ लेफ्ट विंग या अम्बेडकराइट्स तक ही नहीं है. मैं नाम नहीं लेना चाहता, वो आशीष धर जी के भी बहुत प्रिय मित्र रहे हैं. ऐसे तो कुछ लोग वो डाइल्यूट भी करना चाहते हैं कास्ट को, ऐसे ये भी है. परंतु नाम लेना हालांकि सही नहीं होगा. तो ये सिर्फ केवल लेफ्ट विंग या अम्बेडकराइट डिस्कोर्स में नहीं रहा है, बल्कि ये राइट विंग डिस्कोर्स में भी बहुत हद तक है. अभी फॉर एग्जांपल रिसेंटली तिरुपति में जो तिरुमला लड्डू के साथ जो हुआ वो हम सब जानते हैं. परंतु एक सज्जन व्यक्ति का ट्वीट आया जो कि राइट विंग के महारथी रहे हैं. उन्होंने ट्वीट किया है कि जो टेम्पल कंट्रोल है जो स्टेट का, वो केवल और केवल इस कारण से नहीं हटाना चाहिए, नहीं तो क्योंकि अगर हट जाएगा तो वो ब्राह्मण्स वो कंट्रोल कर लेंगे टेम्पल्स को एंड देन कास्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होने लग जाएगा. ये भी एक ये है कि मतलब हमें अगर ये डिबंक करना है, इफ वी रियली वांट टू फ्री टेम्पल्स फ्रॉम द स्टेट कंट्रोल, कुछ नैरेटिव भी हमें सेट करने होंगे. अगर हम वही नैरेटिव से चलेंगे कि डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हुआ है हजारों सालों तक जिसका कोई प्रमाण नहीं है, एंड हम एक्चुअली पानी नहीं पीने देते थे, तो आई डोंट थिंक कि इट विल सर्व एनी पर्पस फॉर द राइट फॉर द सो कॉल्ड राइट विंग्स, फॉर द हिंदू विंग ऑफ कोर्स. सो इसी बारे में वो हमें चर्चा करनी है, और इसी कारण से मैंने आशीष धर जी को बुलाया है, जो कि इस विषय को उठाते भी रहे हैं और बहुत ही आर्टिकुलेट वे में इसको प्रेजेंट भी करते रहे हैं. तो धन्यवाद आशीष जी यहाँ आने के लिए पहली बार तो, एंड ऑल्सो रति जी, आप सहयोग आपके सहयोग के लिए. तो सो द प्लेटफॉर्म इज योर्स आशीष जी.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Adarji, and thank you, Global Brahman Forum, for inviting me, and thank you, Ratiji, for taking the time to have this conversation. And thank you each and every one in the audience for taking your time and to come and listen. मुझे आशा है कि आज का जो भी ये आधा एक घंटे का जो प्रोग्राम है वो it benefits everyone, and I'll try and make it worth your while. Whatever I know of the subject, I will share, and hopefully that will that will help you also to think through some of the stuff that all of us face collectively, and which is really a pressing problem, almost an existential problem for us now, because over the last decade or so, it has become very clear that this is no longer ignorable, and we cannot simply look the other way and think that ठीक है, कुछ टाइम बाद ये सब अपने आप सही हो जाएगा, and this is just temporary. This is only increasing, and this is only going to get more and more intense, because on the other side there is a whole machinery which is at work, and they have very clear objectives, and they are not going to stop. So I think it makes sense for us to get our act together and to understand what we are facing, what is at stake, and how do we deal with it. And I don't think that there is going to be a very एक कोई objective type answer तो होगा नहीं, multiple choice questions की तरह कि ये करें ये करें ये करें ये करें. It has to be a tentative approach. Slowly we can build a strategy and to figure out how we can actually overcome this great propaganda against us. So Ratiji, please take over, and we can continue.
Sure. Just to let all the viewers know, what is exactly atrocity literature? What is it that we're going to be talking about? Sometime in the past, when the invaders came over to rule us and everything, among them we had the Christian invaders also who came. Now, the Christian invaders were not like the Islamic invaders. They did not just to kill. Like the Islamic invaders were more interested in, killing us, or in converting us forcibly, or in just destroying our temples, looting our wealth and all. But the Christian invaders, they decided to uproot us from our roots, which was actually sustaining this civilization. What do I mean by that? They not just cooked up stories about what we actually were. They converted our literature with a mischievous intent, and made it seem like as if we were savages also. And also we committed atrocities on other people from our own land. Apart from that, they also made sure that they passed on these ideas or this agenda to the next generation also. They destroyed our education system also systematically, slowly. What all this resulted in is that the natives of this land started hating themselves for what they were, without even realizing why they were hating each other or even hating themselves. So the biggest impact of atrocity literature is this, that today there is not a single community in our society which seems to be proud about itself. And this is not limited to only Brahmins. Brahmins are anyway, called oppressors or something like that. It is also true for people of other communities, like the Kshatriyas became the bad rulers, the Vaishyas became the traders who used to, loot others through various manners, like the money lending and all that also. Plus, even the Shudras felt bad about themselves because they were reportedly called as the lowest. So from a horizontal system that we had, or, the system of jatis, they made it into a proper vertical thing with the Brahmins at the top and the Shudras, or after that, even the Dalits and the Mahadalits and everybody at the bottom. So everybody in effect started fighting with each other to reach some top, which is not even existing. Okay, the top of the society, which does not even exist. What would you call a society where there is a perceived upper, echelons of power, where there is no power for that person? I mean, is it not the best idea of a completely misguided society, a completely puzzled society who don't even understand what they are doing wrong or what went wrong and how to correct it? So this is basically an introduction to what actually atrocity literature has done. I'll just quickly talk about 2 or 3 examples, and then I'll ask Ashish ji to elaborate on this. First example I'd like to give is from our scriptures. Everybody knows about the Manusmriti, and how all of us are equally bad or even worse than each other. And in that, obviously, it was very, mischievously translated into various ways where, people from non-Brahmin communities were shown as people who never received any education. And we all know that this could have not been true, for the simple reason that if they did not receive any education, we wouldn't be seeing such wonders all over in every part of our country, whether it is in arts, crafts, dance, music, or anything, sculpting, anything and everything, even our weaves, everything. So all these are different ways of education. So it cannot be that others did not receive any education. Even if you're talking about Vedas, or even if you're talking about the Upanishads or anything, it can't be that nobody received any education other than the Brahmins, because of some very, very simple reason. And that is that everybody knows about Bhagavad Gita. And that is the Saransh of the Upanishads. That couldn't have happened if they were never taught about it. Now, the second thing I'd like to tell again about our scriptures itself, the way our heroes were painted in a very tainted manner, like Dronacharya is shown as the big bad teacher because he cut off the thumb of an adharmi. And the adharmi is actually not, I mean, he's shown to be a very poor tribal and etc. and all that. And we know that all that is not true. Same way, Karna is shown as Sutputra without people even realizing that Suta was that community where the Brahmin, where the mother, the parents were actually, one would have been a Brahmin and one would have been a Kshatriya, and the Sutas were also educated, very, very educated. It is not like as if they were, just because today's taxi drivers may not be that educated, it did not mean that those days the charioteers were not educated. You just have to look at Shalya to know what I'm talking about. Then the other way that all this happened, scriptures was one thing. Second thing is creating scriptures, which I think Ashish would be able to tell in a much better manner. That is, for example, the breast tax of Kerala. This was a very beautiful example of atrocity literature, which has been fed into our minds, in a way that to show that they were, the Brahmins were really horrible, whereas actually those stories never existed. It never happened in history, but it has been shown as history to us. Same way in Maharashtra also, we have the Dalits, being painted as the saviors of the independence struggle and all that. And we all know about what happened in some of the riots which took place about 4 or 5 years back, where a whole lot of communists were arrested. So again, these are all made scriptures. So, the third way that all this happens is the news. That also I would take as part of ongoing atrocity literature. Because invariably, even if 2 Dalit communities were fighting with each other and somebody is targeted, the news always paints it as just Dalits were targeted. Nobody talks about who targeted them. And instantly in our minds, because of the way the news is created, we think that it's some higher or whatever, it's so-called higher Varna people who have harmed the Dalits. I don't believe there is anything higher here, but a lot of people think of it as V1, V2, whatever. Then the other way that it happens is also through films. And this also is part of the ongoing thing. So we had in the past, and now we have in the present. And we have a lot of new authors. I'm very sorry to take some of the names, but it needs to be told. I would even include Amish Tripathi ji in this. I would include Devdutt Patnaik in this, for putting out stories in a way that we actually start thinking that, oh my God, all this happened. So, those guys must have been bad. And in turn, we are bad because we are the present generation of these people. The last thing is, now we have talk shows, we have humor, people coming up and pretending to be comedians and, talking humorously about Brahmins. It is not even humor, but they think it is humor. And the saddest part is that these talk shows are now happening by Brahmins itself, who are actually taking pot shots at their own community, or even by Kshatriyas themselves, who are taking pot shots at their own community. Why? Simply because they're brainwashed into thinking that all this is correct. Now, another way that we can talk about atrocity is also linked to how we are now perceiving our gods, our rivers, and basically everything. Our gods have now become just statues fit for museums in many cases. People are always talking about how so many of our sculptures came back to our country, but they are not actually being prayed to. They're still in museums only. Then you have like a rivers, which we were calling as matas, are now just plain water bodies which need cleaning up, and so on and so forth. Our Gomata and all other four-legged creatures and all are treated as just creatures or animals, whereas we in the past, or even today, most of us are taught to look upon them as something above just a creature, as our gods, in fact. Now, Ashish ji, I'd like you to elaborate on some of these things and just first give an idea of what exactly and how we are being brainwashed. And secondly, about how this brainwashing can be stemmed, at least to a certain extent.
Right. Thank you, Ratiji, for this wonderful introduction to the subject. Now, my own tryst with the issue of caste is actually quite random, because we were, as Kashmiri Pandits, we were struggling with other more immediate problems than to think about caste. But it was back in 2016 when the JNU Kanhaiya Kumar episode, when it first happened. And that is what really got me interested in it. कि ये चक्कर क्या है, मतलब वो क्या रहा है ये सब. Before that, I've spent 7 years in Tamil Nadu, as during my education in engineering college, and then after that I was working for 3 years near Chennai. And in all those 7 years, I was, believe it or not, completely caste blind. Although Tamil Nadu politics is totally about caste, I had no clue what was going on around me. So from there to 2016, when this thing happened, then it really got to me, and I thought that I need to figure out what this whole shor sharaba is about. Because you see, like most people, and most, especially in the urban areas, we grow up almost without any caste consciousness. So especially in the metros, in B-tier cities and all, there still is caste consciousness, but in the metros there is hardly any. And then when someone accuses you of being, just because you are born in a certain community, that you have, you are from your childhood, you've been trained to oppress people. So obviously that claim and that accusation sounds funny uh, and serious at the same time. ये चक्कर क्या है? So most people, find ways to look the other way and say कि अच्छा क्या है, हो सकता है कुछ बकवास कर रहे हैं, politics में चलता रहता है. And they carry on with their lives because there are, like I said, like with me also, for the better part of my life, I was totally unaware of this caste politics, except that I knew that people voted according to caste uh, in majority of, major parts of India. So when I got into this, then I started, reading up, and I first came across Rajiv Malhotra ji's work, and where he spoke about caste not being jati and varna and so on and so forth. I think his latest book also builds on that idea. Then I saw some, here and there, I read about Savarkar's views on caste and things like that. But it was finally a totally unexpected interview that I did with Jagat Guru Puri Shankaracharya ji. And that totally knocked me off because I had never thought about it that way. And it gave me some sort of a conceptual grounding and clarity that was missing from the other intellectual discourse, even on the right-wing side. And there is no surprise about it because, someone who's the stature of Shankaracharya ji himself, when he explains something about tradition, obviously it carries much more weightage, it carries much more insight, and it dispels all sorts of misinformation, whatever is in your head, if you are willing to listen to him with an open mind. And I had an open mind because I wanted to figure out what this whole thing is about. So since then, I've tried to, explore more into the history of things, and I also started thinking about the idea of actually putting all the learnings into a book. And a lot of people have been after me why that book has not come out, because I got busy with a lot of other projects and I don't really have the bandwidth. Now I've again started with a friend, because this topic is so complex and so vast that I know for sure that I can't handle it alone. So that book is also again back in business. Now, having read a lot of this literature, delving into history, going through records of inscriptions, what other people have talked about, literary evidence, or people from the other side, like Ambedkar, for example, he has written a lot about caste. So I've tried to cover a whole range of literature that could, possibly give me a well-rounded view of the whole issue. But I am not going to talk about all that here, obviously, because the topic is annihilating caste atrocity literature. And to stick to the topic, I just, want to start with why I gave this whole background, is to say that all of that research and study, though I think it is very valuable, obviously I've personally put in that time, so I obviously think that it is valuable. And I hope that it will be valuable for anyone who reads it eventually. But I think that as far as countering caste atrocity literature goes and the politics thereof, I don't think it is going to make any difference at all. Because we need to understand what atrocity literature really is. And if you look at the term itself, it is, I think, I'm not sure, but I think it was coined by Rajiv Malhotra ji, or at least it was popularized by him in his works on Breaking India, where he clarified that the term is used to refer to the vast amount of information and propaganda text produced in colonial times to malign India's indigenous culture and traditions and, So the whole point of producing atrocity literature was to justify the British rule. Now, with respect to caste itself, the Britishers and the missionaries who preceded them and accompanied them later on, they were particularly frustrated because if you go through that literature, what the missionaries have written, and we had published an article on Pragyata written by Halli Kalyan and Sai Priya. They've done a beautiful job in compiling a lot of these different sources, different missionaries, what they've said about caste. And all of them agree that caste happens to be or happened to be the greatest obstacle in the way of converting Hindus to Christianity. Ironically, this view has been twisted on its head, and nowadays people say that caste is the actual point or the fulcrum through which Hindus get converted, while the missionary view is exactly the opposite. So I would rather listen to the enemy when he's expressing that frustration than theories on Twitter. Now, after these missionaries, there were a lot of these willing accomplices of the missionaries, people like Phule and even Ambedkar, who left no stone unturned to further that view on caste. Because these guys kept attacking caste with the aim of destroying the institution so that they could convert. And some of them had already converted, and some of them were not very happy with what was going on. They were doing their own politics. And so they joined hands, and this became a really solid front of attack on the native tradition. But at the very core of it, atrocity literature is basically propaganda. It is propaganda to justify their own presence in India, which was obviously illegitimate. But in the 20th century, with the advances in technology and with also with the changes in the global world order, things changed very fast, and the nature of propaganda itself changed. And it changed radically. It evolved so fast that all people across the world, including the ones who were inventors of this kind of modern propaganda, they themselves fell victim to propaganda. So interesting that you mentioned in your opening remarks about how caste system, not the system, but how the Jati Varna matrix was a horizontal sort of web, and how it became a pyramid. In the atrocity literature, it is often shown as a pyramid.
Yes.
Now, this was not by design, and I believe that their conception of it as a pyramid was because the times were changing. The context in which they were viewing society was changing, and that is also what the problem is today. So when you look at a social organization, how society is organized, or how a certain community lives and organizes itself, orders itself, what kind of rules it follows. There is a wider context to the world that we live in. And in the pre-industrial times, the world was a very different world. We were not living in an industrial setup. There was no meritocracy, and there were still thriving communities, right? And there was no modern law. There was no technology. Most importantly, and so when you looked at some way of how a society was organized, the context was entirely different, and so you saw it as a web. Now, because everything is, we live in a hyper-capitalistic society, at least what is called the free world. The free world is called so because it is also propaganda, right? So it is called the free world, and in the free world, which is a hyper-capitalistic world, global capitalism thrives and rules the roost. In this world, everything is about the pursuit of wealth, and wealth is the only only currency or only value that you are allowed to pass on to the next generation. So when you have reduced the whole framework of Purusharthas to just one single agenda, one item in that entire vast web, which is money. So everyone is, running after money, and this is very common knowledge. We even in our drawing room discussions we always say कि यार आजकल तो सब लोग पैसे के पीछे ही भागते हैं. It has become so common that we are even blind to that. जैसे मछलियां होती हैं तो मछलियों को पानी नहीं दिखाई देता, हमें भी ये दिखाई नहीं देता because it's so common. It's the norm. And so this norm, because it is everywhere, if we go back to our traditional way of living and we look at it in the context of this pursuit of wealth, then obviously it is a pyramid. Because now there is nothing else. There is no interdependence. Everything has been commercialized. And because people are not pursuing any purusharthas, properly speaking, the society is not. Collectively, it is not. Individually, we may all like to think that we are. But as a society, we are not. So such a society, which could be called a propaganda society, is obviously a hierarchical society, a very absolutely hierarchical society, with no regard to context. In the previous era, if there was hierarchy, it was contextual. It was in a certain sense, right? You could be more important as a community. Let's say Kshatriyas could be more important on the battlefield than the Brahmanas, obviously. But in the temple, maybe the Brahmanas would be more important. Likewise, when you're doing trade, the Vaishyas would obviously have more say in the guilds, in the affairs of the economy than the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas were mostly writing texts and their anushthanas and whatever. So that, because everything became so uniform, so now we are accused of being that. So this is a disease of presentism, where we look at the past through the lens of the present. And this is a very deep-rooted disease. This cannot be done away by giving lectures. So when in the 20th century, when propaganda became all pervasive and it became a sociological phenomenon, it ceased to remain something that people did for some effect. Like we could accuse the Britishers of writing atrocity literature to justify their own presence. But later on in the 20th century, propaganda was everywhere because we lived in a technological society. And this happened largely due to the advent of mass media. Radio first, then television came, then social media came, and now we are in the era of smartphones-based social media, where the last person in the line, everyone, from the sabzi wala to some high-flying corporate executive, everyone has their own personal screen through which they're consuming content. The other major factor is the emergence of liberal democracy, which goes hand in hand with these changes, with industrialization and with the atomization of society and with the technological society coming in. So you have the other major factor, which is the emergence of a liberal democracy as the dominant form of the government. And all major political propaganda emanates from the need to justify the existence of democracy and to provide it legitimacy. And contrary to popular belief that propaganda is about lies, if we go through the literature on propaganda, we just recently, I'm still very fresh with these ideas on propaganda because we just recently recorded a book review on this seminal work on propaganda called Propaganda, the Making of the Modern Man or something. And it's written by, the author is Jacques Ellul. And if we go through the book, then we realize that, whatever we think about the world that we live in is all an illusion and a result of being victims of propaganda. So now the question and the title of this talk being that annihilation of atrocity, caste atrocity literature. So the question obviously is, can this atrocity literature propaganda be eliminated? And I believe that the short answer is no. And the long answer is that as the author that I just mentioned, as he says, that since propaganda is the Siamese twin of the technological society, it cannot be wished away. It is an integral part of modern life. So rather than finding ways to eliminate or annihilate propaganda, it is more prudent to protect ourselves from it. So it's better to take a vaccine shot and to prevent that disease from entering, rather than going for the cure, because the cure is very hard. It directly affects your immune system. Now, once we are immune to propaganda of a certain kind, then we can produce counter propaganda, or more preferably anticipatory propaganda, so that we are, we call the shots. So there are two kinds of, again, I'm going into the theory of it because I want some of these ideas to at least percolate. And though it is abstract, but I think it will be still useful. So there are two kinds of propaganda that are possible. I mean, you can classify propaganda in various ways, but there are two kinds which are possible. And one of these classifications is that there is one called the agitation propaganda, which is to inspire people to take to the streets, to agitate. And then there is the integration propaganda. So I believe that if we figure out what it really is, then we can actually indulge in counter propaganda on our adversaries. And the agitation propaganda can be used for those who are firmly against us, those who are already converted and want to attack us. And integration propaganda can be used to rehabilitate the undecided and those who are unwilling to fall for the other side's nonsense. So someone like the Bhim army should be subject to agitation propaganda from our side, so that we are able to figure out and we are able to manipulate them to waste their energies in nonsensical activities. Now, I've said a lot about propaganda, but it is important to clarify certain things, because propaganda means different things to different people. It's a very widely used term and it's thrown around very casually. Anything you disagree with becomes propaganda. But propaganda is basically a system that aids totalitarian society. It's a tool for totalitarianism. Now, what is totalitarianism would be another digression, but I'll not go into that. But most people would, kind of have an idea what totalitarianism is. But it kind of equips people to take action. It provides immediate incentives for taking action. It is not propaganda unless it tells you to do something, right? And it is, in that sense, a myth, an organized myth that takes hold of the entire person. So the key component here is action, and it could be action of any kind. Like democratic propaganda asks you to work. Asks you to vote. Corporate propaganda asks you to work hard. Famously 70 hours a day or whatever, 70 hours a week. Or there's other kinds of ideological propaganda. It could ask you to riot. Religious propaganda could ask you to kill. So now, when we compare ourselves with the Judeo-Christian religions, for example, the desert cults, they are systems of propaganda from the very start. And their society is a totalitarian society that way. Now, often we hear that we should also become like them, and we have to get organized. Abhi aaj hi someone was saying on Twitter that we should get united and all that. Now unity, Hindu unity and this whole business we had done 5 years back, we had done a pinpoint video on Upward on that subject, and I think that that reasonably explains it. But unity in itself means nothing. And it is only a euphemism for propaganda, for getting organized to do something, right? So ideological propaganda that way. You vote for a certain party, and that is why you need to get united. If you don't do it, then you are doomed, right?
Yes.
So that kind of propaganda is already around us all the time.
Yeah, it's in the works already.
Yeah. So traditional Hindu society was organized for the fulfillment of purusharthas. And modern industrial society, as I said, is organized for maximizing wealth. Now, when an individual is separated from his land and community and gods and made to serve the global economic engine, propaganda is required for that. To keep the individual in a state of some kind of a delusion, so that he may not even grasp the idea of purusharthas, right? So in this, the most important thing that I want to bring out here after this all this long-winded thing about propaganda is that in a democracy, in which, like how we live in a democracy, we have to understand that a lot of words are thrown around saying that the truth will emerge and truth will come out and all that. But in a propaganda society, truth is powerless without the crutches of propaganda, and it really has no content of its own. So, because the times that we live in again is thoroughly Christian in nature. I mean, the Indian polity is organized in such a way that we have a very Christian sort of worldview by default, even though we may be Hindus. So in such a scenario, we always receive truth through history. And that is why there is so much emphasis on facts. Propaganda always builds on facts. It does not build on lies. Modern propaganda, right? It's always on facts. It could twist the truth. It could quote the truth out of context. It could be half truth, limited truth, so on and so forth. But it always has that basis. And that truth is derived from history, because history is apparently scientific. It is apparently material. It is empirical in nature. So it is self-evident. And anything that is called mythology is bad. It's fantasy. It doesn't exist, which is the opposite of how Hindus should think.
Correct.
Because history is malleable, it is contentious. And what we call itihasa was by design not meant to record dates. Otherwise, our sages were capable of writing those dates down. We had many calendars. But these dates were not mentioned deliberately because it was prevented to go in that direction, towards the direction of propaganda.
It was timeless.
Yes, it was timeless because it was meant to escape time. It was meant for you to escape time.
Yes.
And to fulfill your purusharthas again. Now, how propaganda operates is that it hooks on to current circumstances. And this is the most important part, that all this, finally, I wanted to say this, that propaganda hooks onto current circumstances because, as I said, the definition of propaganda is that it has to mobilize people. It has to bring them to do something. They have to act rationally, irrationally, whatever it is, right? So unless propaganda can manage to do that, it has not won the game. And so you can only be captured as an individual by propaganda if there is a resonance between your lived reality, lived social reality, and the propaganda that is directed to you. Okay? So history as such, you cannot start from history and believe that you will address atrocity literature. like we have done in our own in our own articles. We go back to history, say that this is how it was. While that is all important, but you cannot counter propaganda that way, because the propaganda is rooted in the present. If a so-called lower caste, if someone from the Chamar community uh, is living a life which is making him um, angry, right? Or which gives him a sense of that he got a raw deal, that there is injustice in the world. That is the premise on which propaganda operates. It does not operate on objective facts of history that Sir Jadunath Sarkar wrote about this, or Dharampal had written that there is. It does not. It
Correct.
will never
He
do
can't
that.
relate to it. Yeah.
Yes.
He relates to what his present circumstances.
Yes. So, in order to actually counter that, that mindset, it is important for us to not obsess over history. History has its own place. The scholarship in history is extremely important, but one has to look around ourselves about what is going on today and acknowledge the problems of the current times. Uh, if we see through modernity, and this is a Brahmin forum, and this is especially for the Brahmins, because we are supposed to uh, take that responsibility on behalf of the society, right? And just a small digression here, that in on social media, very often when we speak about Brahmins and issues that we face, there is a tendency amongst some people or some individuals, or sometimes anonymous handles, to say that, oh, we should just care about ourselves and we forget about the rest, and we are not Hindu, we are just Brahmins. I think that is an extremely foolish view, and that that sort of view, while it may appeal to your baser senses, is absolutely insane. Because uh, as the Purusha Sukta itself says, that the Purusha is composed of all the four varnas, and you cannot cut off any varna from the Purusha. If you do that, if we say that we are separate from the body of the Purusha, then we are lifeless.
Exactly.
So whatever it may be, we have to remain part of this larger Samaj, the four varnas. We are just one of those four varnas, and our responsibility as, let's say, thought leaders, has to be to figure out what is wrong today, and to really build on that, and then use the data from history to build our case, and to counter the kind of atrocity literature, the claims of the atrocity literature that way. Because if we go back to history and we go back to philosophy and we say all sorts of abstract things without telling or without pronouncing why things are messed up today, and why certain people right or certain communities got or a bad deal, including ours, right? So we have to clarify, and we have to make that the starting point, and then go back in time and probably process more data that way. So if we undo the knots of modernity, and really show people how tragic their current lives are because of the institutions of modernity, then we would be able to do justice to this whole business uh, of atrocity literature, of countering it. And I would like to close here, but I just want to read from the book Propaganda. I want to read an excerpt from that book, which uh, which which was my last point. So I quote the author here, and he says, "Neither past events nor great metaphysical problems challenge the average individual. He is not sensitive to what is tragic in life. He is not anguished by a question that God might put to him. He does not feel challenged except by current events, political or economic. Therefore, propaganda must start with current events. It would not reach anybody if it tried to base itself on historical facts." So, so with that, I will end my presentation.
Thanks.
And if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Thanks so much, Ashish. You actually touched on a lot of points. I'll just quickly review these points. First thing you talked about, history should not be the focal point of whatever combating we have to do now. And that's very interesting because we are seeing in our own country our own history of the freedom struggle and of our leaders and how their name is being smeared again and again in various use, which itself should go to prove how bad it is if we were to only concentrate on modern history and the versions of modern history that we read today. That's the first thing that really struck me as very important. Second thing, you said that propaganda always is based on truth itself, right? There has to be a modicum of truth in it for it to take root in people's mind and everything. So I'd like to, bring everybody's attention to something that the Japanese and the Chinese have done very beautifully to counter, they also are old civilizations, but they are not facing the same problems as far as civilizational knowledge goes, as far as culture goes. Even though China, for example, is a communist country, you will still see that they are having a lot of pride in whatever their ancient culture is. And it's not just a bookish pride, it's actual pride in those people. Now, what they did, this is my understanding, I may be right, wrong, you can give your opinion on it. They very beautifully created new stories. And in the new stories, they put in all the wisdom of the ancient civilization. If you were to pick up any manga comics, if you were to pick up, any of those animes and everything, you will see how again and again, all the dialogues talk about certain character building, certain, morals and everything, again, which is all from their ancient civilization. So it's a very wonderful way to have propaganda to counter the fake narratives that we have seen in our atrocity literature in our country. If we want to do this, there's absolute need for a lot more writers to come up with stories in various languages. It need not be in English, it need not be in Hindi, it could be in any regional language. And I know I was not a fan of that serial of Mukesh Khanna. What is that? Bhima? I don't remember the name. Shaktiman, I think it was. But I do know that a lot of tier 2, tier 3 city children, the village, children in the villages and all, took a lot of pride and, they loved that serial. And I can understand today why they must have loved it, because it did touch certain things. It made them feel that, okay, we still have that power in us, which we keep talking about, Vishwaguru, we keep telling, but it's just a term now. If we want to think about being Vishwagurus, we need to have that pride in that, in whatever our ancient knowledge system was. And I think it's time that, people started acknowledging also that even if we need to use that term Vishwaguru, we need to respect all communities, all our Varnas. Because if it were not for the Brahmin Varna or the Kshatriya Varna, you wouldn't even have all those, or even your Vaishyas who, the way they did trade, especially maritime trade, so much we could learn from them, or even from our Shudras, whatever. If you want to talk about being a Vishwaguru, you need to appreciate those jatis a lot. By, talking bad about those jatis, you cannot say you have the right to call yourself a Vishwaguru, or to say that we were or we are the inheritors of ancient knowledge. You're not the inheritor of any ancient knowledge at all, unless you are practicing it, unless you are actually following it. And that is one thing that, I really liked what you said about propaganda being based on truth. If it is not based on truth, it's not going to last. Then the other thing, one very nice point you made, towards the end about how we need to re-establish ourselves in our thought systems, or, in your words, you put it up. So yes, dear listeners, I'd definitely like to say that, if we are not going to be practicing Hindus, there's absolutely no way that we are going to reach even 1% of the knowledge that we had in the past. If you do not understand the meaning of contemplation, if you don't understand the meaning of meditation, going with contemplation, and you don't understand the meaning of following all your nitya karmas and everything, you're definitely not reaching anywhere there. So if you want to fight against atrocity, first start loving what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a point there that, like I said, that the idea of propaganda is to completely dominate your life, and to the totality of your existence is based on that then, which basically means that it makes you act in a certain direction uh, for a specific purpose. So you are surrounded by propaganda of all kinds, educational propaganda, commercial propaganda, political propaganda, and all of them ask you to do certain things. Now, in the traditional scheme, in what was meant by the Hindu life as such was the pursuit of purusharthas. And let's say each varna had their own swadharma defined based on their varna and the ashram, the varnashrama dharma. So when varnashrama dharma collapses in Kali Yuga, what happens is that everything that it stood for is replaced by an alternative, by a replica, a fake replica, right? And that fakeness is what surrounds us in the name of modernity. Similarly, the purusharthas, the pursuit of purusharthas, and our praxis is what constituted our life, our practical life. And that practical life is now taken over by the objectives of propaganda. So whether we are buying, we're doing consumerism, we take the example of Tirth Yatra. So Tirth Yatra, the classical view is that you go and you give up everything to make that. To places like Kedarnath, people would go when they had finished all their duties.
Very old and
हाँ पिंडदान करके चले गए कि हाँ मर गया तो वापस नहीं आऊंगा, right? That's very well known. And that has now been changed by helicopter rides and things like that, right? And it has become a matter of entitlement that why can't I go? I have the right to go. And this is universal, ubiquitous. Everywhere people say the same thing. That is because we live in that technological society. But our dharma does not endorse technological society. Manusmriti talks about Mahayantras as a big source of papam, right? So it's very clear that we are at loggerheads with modernity. And I simply don't understand when a lot of current day Hindu intellectuals, when they say that, Hinduism is very comfortable with modernity and we have our own version of modernity. No, I'm really sorry. I simply don't understand all this. There is simply no compatibility with modernity. We have to negotiate it. We know that it is inevitable, but we cannot say that Kali Yuga is the best yuga, even though dharma is standing on its own, only one leg. Yet we see dharma everywhere. So that is not how it is, right?
Yeah.
So to come back to the point that our praxis, if we are able to even do a fraction of what our ancestors were doing in terms of our nitya karma and all the obligations that are required, we are already taking one step away from propaganda, because that actual practical step, that concrete thing that we do, is the answer to. And I'm sorry, but just to use the expression, is showing the middle finger to the propaganda.
Totally, absolutely. This is something that, everybody needs to understand, and Brahmins, I think, need to understand it the most, that unless you go back to respecting some of your ancient customs, you can't talk about getting respect in return. I mean, as simple as that, actually. And one last thing I definitely want to ask you. See, today's youth, I mean, whether it's Brahmin youth or anybody, the amount of deracination is so high because we are not tackling even a little bit of our ancient culture. We're not teaching it to our children. We are not teaching them how to be respectful about it or how to take pride in it also, even in our schools. I mean, yes, there has been a new education policy, but I think it is not really helping anyone at all. If we are still going to be talking about how, the Islamic invaders were so great and falana dimkana, how are we going to, instill pride in our children? What do you have to say to that? And also, of course, a lot of our politicians of all hues, I don't want to take names, everybody knows which politicians have said what. They keep talking about Hisab Chukta. They keep talking about how, everybody is a Hindu. They keep talking about how the Brahmins were so bad, or the priests especially, they talk about how they were so bad and everything. And that is why social equality insists that, I mean, if you want to bring about social equality, you got to destroy all this. How do we tackle this one thing I wanted to ask you, because the basis
Can I
of
come in?
everything
Can
is
I
that. Just give
can
me
I
a
come
minute.
in?
We're finishing. We're just
I
finishing, and then we'll take questions.
Let them
Give me a
finish and
minute.
then.
Okay.
Yeah, Ashish.
So as far as the kids go, I think as I see it, at Upward also we've developed two separate cartoon shows. First we started with one, then it got
Yeah.
divided into two. So we've developed two, and we are waiting for the right moment, actually funding, to productionize it. But those two are ready. So the approach that we've taken there is to actually base it in today's circumstances. Like I was saying, unless you are appealing to the sociological sense of an individual, whether it is a child or an adult, as in the current day, you cannot really breach that defense mechanism that they have, the psychological defense that they have against some ideas, especially the ancient ideas. So if you want to introduce dharma to children, rather than telling them about the greatness of it and endlessly going on about why they should do this and why they should do that, their moral dilemmas today have to be addressed. And we will find enough in our literature, because that's the only source actually where they will get the answers. They will not get answers in modern literature.
Correct.
So that, I think, is the key, that we understand. I think where we are lacking as a society is that we ourselves don't have a very clear idea about the problems that surround us, and about how, let's say, simple things like a lot of the so-called right-wingers are totally gung-ho about free market economics. But they don't look around them, and they don't look around themselves and see how many beggars we are surrounded with. Children do that, right? And with each passing year, I see more downtrodden people around us. And
Yes.
children recognize that. Now, it does not mean, if you say this thing on social media, you will immediately be labeled as a communist. But that is not the point. The point is that because a majority of the so-called right wing is already deluded by this propaganda, they have already internalized this. So they're saying that there is only one way to go forward. And that is to pursue more and more and more and more of this capitalist ideal.
Capitalist.
Right? That does not work. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that it's bad, but there is a limit to certain things. For example, if we say that Europe became what it is today because of industrialization, that is a fact. But it is also equally true that if we were to follow that same path, we will get destroyed in the process, because we are already 300 years late to the party. And things have moved on. Industrial revolution happened a long time back. So these are very simple things that children do realize intuitively, that there's something which is wrong. If your neighbors or if your own elders are talking to people below them in social status rudely, that is something that gets registered and that becomes internalized. And then no matter how much sermons and how many lectures you give them on good behavior, that's not going to change their mind. So Hindu society, I think, has this peculiar problem that people don't really see what is wrong in the current times, and then sort of bring in the wisdom of the ages. They only do the latter without doing the former.
A very confused society, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think now we can start taking some questions because it's an hour since we started.
Please.
And I think Ramaji wanted to say something.
Hey, yeah, I'm sorry I cut you all at that point. I'm sorry about that. See, I was just thinking through everything, right? Yes, as much as a Brahmin needs to do their Nitya Karma, this is my opinion, seeing I'm in the US. I cannot opine for everybody and their perspective, but I've seen the Brahmins are doing and trying to do their Nitya Karma compared to the previous generation, in the sense that my husband would do it more than what my father or father-in-law did. And I cannot talk about the generations before that. And we have a community around that does it. But at a point, right, we realize that I am going to be stuck with my 5 purusharthas. I am putting my money into retirement. I am putting my money into an investment insurance. I was not supposed to do this. And at some point, they're just coming back and saying, yeah, God will take care of everything. Bhagavan knows everything. But I think we are shutting ourselves from the point that, hey, I have a duty to instill the anger in a Kshatriya to stand up for Dharma. Right? It pains to see that even practicing Hindus, that's the word you said, right? Practicing Hindus or people who follow our Nitya Karmas, we are not getting angry and enraged with the Waft Act. We are not getting angry and enraged with the Laddus in Tirupati. It just seems to be like, okay, I have come and mastered the art of ignoring the collective society and my responsibility. And I think that's what the generation needs. So I think how we tackle 20 and lower year students and children, and how we tackle the 25 to 50-year people is going to be completely different. The anger needs to come from the middle-aged people. The education needs to be solid in our dharma for the younger. So I think from our way of countering the propaganda, it needs to take 2 different paths.
All right.
And I think that's where we should focus. I mean, that's just my opinion on things. Just saying.
Yeah, I agree, Rama, that it has to be a multi-pronged approach, obviously. But my submission here in this talk was only that we first understand how propaganda works, and
Sure.
if we have to also, because we live in these times, then for our own survival, for our own welfare, we may also need to do some propaganda.
Of
That
course.
propaganda we should not first drink ourselves and then
Yeah, true. Of course.
victimized by
Yeah.
that. So that's what happens. So, for example, democracy as such, I think we need to give up this this fascination for democracy.
For democracy.
It's one of the worst ways of governance ever. This liberal democracy, and it's not something that I am saying because I believe that there should be some authoritarian government, but it's just if you go down deep into what liberal democracy is about, and if we scan through some good literature on this, so every sane mind has come to this conclusion that this is a
Yes.
really terrible way of society to
Governance.
function. And this is also, I mean, this has come about only because of the unprecedented and
Failure of.
rapid and exponential growth of big tech. So
Sure.
that is how it has happened, and that is why democracy is the only viable method, because nothing else can survive, because culture has given way to just rampant technology everywhere. So in these times, democracy we may have to live by, but we cannot ourselves get taken in by the false promises of democracy. We need to find ways to manipulate it for our for dharma. Even if we are living in Kali Yuga, all right, we acknowledge that we can't bring back Ram Rajya maybe, but we can certainly make things better in our limited ways. And
Absolutely.
for that to happen, we need to see through things very clearly. And we need to stop this obsession with these modern parlances. For half a century, we were obsessed with secularism. Now it is all democracy and
Democracy.
ideology and stuff like that. Ideology, I'm so sorry to say that, is a totally adharmic idea. And I keep hearing again and again that people are saying, oh, he's not true to his ideology. तो इतना तो पता ही होना चाहिए ना,
Yeah,
that ideology is just a tool. And especially if you are a Brahmin. So you should at least know that, right?
true. Of
So,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
Ramaji, I'd like to take any other question if there is, please,
No,
because of
I'm good.
lack of time.
मैडम
Yeah.
एक क्वेश्चन मैं आशीष सर से पूछना चाहता हूँ। मैं राजस्थान में रहता हूँ और यहाँ के समाज में मैं देखता हूँ कि लगभग हर जाति ब्राह्मण बैशिंग में एंगेज रहती है, चाहे वो सैनी हो या इवन वैश्य हो, वो सभी ब्राह्मण बैशिंग करते ही रहते हैं। और उनको काउंटर करने के लिए मैं हमेशा अनकॉन्फिडेंट और तर्कहीन महसूस करता हूँ। मेरे पास तर्क नहीं होते उनको जवाब देने के लिए। जैसे अभी जब कनागत का समय चल रहा है, पितृपक्ष चल रहा है, तो एक सज्जन आकर मुझसे कहते हैं कि ये तो ब्राह्मणों की चांदी वाले दिन है, इन दिनों में ब्राह्मण खूब खाएंगे और पेट पे हाथ फेर कर चल देंगे। अब उनको मैं बड़ा ही मतलब एक मीक सा आंसर देता हूँ कि आप ही तो बुलाते हैं। तो इसके लिए मेरे पास कोई थियोलॉजिकल ऐसा सटीक आंसर नहीं मिलता कि मैं उनका मुंह बंद कर सकूं, क्योंकि मैं चाहता हूं कि उनका मुंह बंद हो, क्योंकि वो हर क्षेत्र में मेरे साथ यही व्यवहार करते हैं। वो सरकारी महकमों में हमारा सरनेम देखते हैं, उसके बाद वो ब्राह्मणों का मखौल उड़ाते हैं।
जी
ये वाली व्यवस्था मैं चारों तरफ देख रहा हूँ।
जी जी
यहाँ पर जो उत्तर भारत की जो ब्राह्मणों की स्थिति है, वो इतने ब्राह्मण इतने प्रबुद्ध नहीं है जितने दक्षिण भारत के ब्राह्मण हैं बौद्धिक रूप से और मतलब सक्सेस के टर्म्स में। तो हम काफी पीछे महसूस करते हैं कई मामलों में। कई गोत्र ऐसे हैं ब्राह्मणों के, जैसे सनाड्य वगैरह, वो काफी पीछे भी हैं, इकोनॉमिकली भी काफी पीछे हैं। तो मैं
जी
चाहता हूं कि जैसे आशीष सर ने एक पॉइंट बोला था कि कम्युनिज्म के आइडियाज को हम बिल्कुल नकार नहीं सकते, हम क्या अपनी जाति में ये आइडियाज को अप्लाई कर सकते हैं? क्या हम अपने बच्चों को, हम जैसे मैं हूँ, मेरे मेरे जैसे लड़कों को हम ट्रेन कर सकते हैं कि वो तर्कों का भी जवाब दें, प्रोपेगेंडास का भी जवाब दें, जैसे कि बाकी मुस्लिम संगठन वगैरह भी करते हैं? वो काफी ट्रेंड होते हैं इस मामले में।
देखिए,
तो
ये जो
ऐसा
तर्क की बात है ना, कि तर्क देना, और ये एक तरह से ना अब सोशल मीडिया आ गया है, पहले टीवी ज्यादा लोग देखते थे, तो ये जो सारा पॉलिटिक्स है ये टीवी और सोशल मीडिया के लिए चलता है। ये एक तरह से सर्कस चलता है, और सर्कस में लोग एक दूसरे को बोल रहे हैं और लोग मजे ले रहे हैं, मनोरंजन के लिए ये सब चीजें चलती रहती है। इसका पॉलिटिक्स पे असर होता है, लेकिन वो पॉलिटिक्स पे जो उसका प्रभाव है वो प्री डिसाइडेड है। वो तो ऑलरेडी गेम वन साइडेड है, वो मैच फिक्स्ड है। तो आप कितने भी बढ़िया तर्क दे दें, आप कितना भी कन्विंसिंग आंसर्स दे दें, उससे कोई अंतर नहीं आने वाला। ये मेरा इस पूरे टॉक का मेन पॉइंट ये था। उसको चेंज करने के लिए, जो जिसको ओवरटर्न विंडो कहते हैं, कि ओवरटर्न विंडो एक एक रेंज ऑफ आइडियाज है जो आप पब्लिक में बोल सकते हैं, है ना। वो आइडियाज जो हैं वो पॉलिसी उसके बिल्कुल सेंटर में होता है, कि जो स्टेट की पॉलिसी है वो उन आइडियाज के सेंटर में है, जो बिल्कुल एकदम एक्सेप्टेबल है। और फिर उसके बाद वो पॉलिसी के बाद वो एक्सेप्टेबल की बाउंड्रीज जहां तक होती हैं वो आप पब्लिक में बोल सकते हैं। उसके बियॉन्ड जिसको बोला जाता है वो रेडिकल और अनथिंकेबल है। तो जो वामपंथी हैं उनका जो सबसे ज्यादा जो सफलता उनको स्ट्रेटेजिकली मिली है वो इस चीज में मिली है कि वो हमेशा ओवरटर्न विंडो को अपने फेवर में टिल्ट करते आ रहे हैं, करते जाएं। क्योंकि वामपंथियों का कोई ऐसा ऐसा नहीं है कि वामपंथियों के पास कोई ज्यादा हाई आईक्यू है। उनका सिर्फ इतना है, क्योंकि वो जिस दिशा में हिस्ट्री है, जिस दिशा में हिस्टोरिकल ट्रैजेक्टरी है, वो जो प्रोपेल्ड बाय द टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंजन, जिस हिस्ट्री की हम बात कर रहे हैं, प्रोपेल्ड बाय द टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंजन, उस हिस्ट्री की ट्रैजेक्टरी के साथ वो सबसे आगे हैं झंडा लिए हुए, कि हम प्रोग्रेसिव हैं जी, हम तो मानते हैं कि ये ऐसा ही ठीक है। जहां हिस्ट्री जाएगी, भले ही जेनोसाइड हो जाए, वो कहते हैं यही ठीक है। हिस्ट्री का जो ठेका है वो उन्होंने ले रखा है। तो इसलिए हमें हमेशा लगता है कि वामपंथ आगे है। अब उसमें क्या है कि वो ओवरटर्न विंडो उनके फेवर में इस तरह से शिफ्ट होती है कि वो हमेशा समय से पहले जो है अनथिंकेबल और रेडिकल आइडियाज को मेन स्ट्रीम करने की क्षमता रखते हैं। वो कैसे रखते हैं? क्योंकि उनके पास पूरा प्रपंच है, उनके पास पूरे इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं जो उनको इसमें एनेबल करते हैं, स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम एकेडमिया, कि वो रिसर्च पेपर्स लिख सकते हैं। आज वो रिसर्च पेपर इस बात पे लिख सकते हैं कि कैसे कुत्ते के साथ शादी करना भी ठीक है, एक्सेप्टेबल है। तो वो कोई किसी यूनिवर्सिटी में कोई पागल प्रोफेसर लिख देगा और वो कहीं पब्लिश हो जाएगा, और उसके बेस पे मीडिया वो उठा लेगा और मीडिया उस पर डिस्कस करेगा। उसका भले ही पहले मजाक उड़ाए, लेकिन वो पब्लिक कॉन्शियसनेस में बात आ जाएगी। और कुछ साल बाद, लगभग समझिए 5-10 साल हो जाए उसके बाद, वो चीज धीरे धीरे नॉर्मलाइज होती जाए। अब हमारा क्या है कि हमारे पास ये पूरा जो इंस्टीट्यूशंस का वेब है ये है नहीं। तो पहला पॉइंट तो ये है कि पहला हमें उनकी लेवल का तो हम बना नहीं सकते, ना हमारे पास उतना पैसा है, ना हमारे पास उतना समय है, पर कुछ लेवल का हमारे पास होना चाहिए ताकि हम भी ओवरटर्न विंडो को अपने फेवर में, धर्म के फेवर में शिफ्ट कर सके। और जब हम रैडिकल आइडियाज जो आज की संदर्भ में जिनको रैडिकल और अनथिंकेबल आइडियाज बोले जाएं, वो जब हम तरीके ढूंढ लें उस उन थॉट्स को पब्लिक में ओपनली बोलने के, तो तब हम ये कह सकते हैं कि 5-10 साल के अंदर हम भी कुछ उखाड़ लेंगे डिस्कोर्स। तो जब वो पॉसिबल होगा, जब हमारे पास इंस्टीट्यूशंस होंगे और हमारे पास वो क्लैरिटी होगी, तभी इस प्रॉब्लम का हल हो सकता है। तर्क तो हमारे पास उनसे कहीं बेहतर है, लेकिन तर्क से फर्क नहीं पड़ता। वही मेरा पूरा पॉइंट था, क्योंकि आज की जो स्थिति है उसको, उसका हुक जो है वो उनके पास है, हमारे पास नहीं।
सर मुझे उसमें जो वो तर्क देते हैं उसमें उनकी साजिश महसूस होती है, जैसे वो हमें कुंठित करना चाहते हैं परमानेंटली। जैसे
सर,
किसी
जैसे आशीष जी ने बोला वो तो होता रहेगा। एंड आप कितना भी तर्क करिए, वो कुतर्क करके आपका जितना भी आप बोल रहे हैं उसको नेगेट कर देंगे। तो तर्क करने से मतलब नहीं है इसका। सो यू कैन नॉट आर्ग्यू कंटिन्यूअसली, उसमें मतलब ही नहीं है। सो यू मेक योर सेल्फ बेटर फॉर योर ओन सेल्फ। तो जब सही मौका आएगा तब आप वार कीजिए, बस यही एक तरीका है।
देखिए, ये मतलब कहने का मतलब ये है कि कलेक्टिवली ही इसका उत्तर दिया जा सकता है। इंडिविजुअली हम कितना भी स्ट्रगल कर लें, उनको वो कलेक्टिव है। जैसे हम बात करते हैं कि आज भले मतलब कुछ और जो समुदाय विशेष के लोग हैं, वो जब किसी चीज पे अड़ जाते हैं तो वो कलेक्टिवली अड़ जाते हैं, और हम तो इंडिविजुअली रिस्पॉन्ड करते हैं ना। हम तो हमारे पास वो इंस्टीट्यूशंस नहीं है। ऐसा नहीं है कि हमारे पास यूनिटी नहीं है। जैसे कई लोग बोलते हैं ना कि हिंदू बटे हुए हैं, हिंदू बटे हुए नहीं है। हिंदुओं के पास इंस्टीट्यूशंस नहीं है जहां से वो एक्ट कर सके। हमारे पास कौन सी यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं और वहां पे हमारा पूरा कंट्रोल है जहां पे हम भी ऐसे पेपर लिखवाएं। आपको मैं एग्जांपल देता हूं, मैं कश्मीर से हूं। कश्मीर के जो 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 आतंकवाद के ऊपर और ये पूरा जो इनकी ये जिहादी मूवमेंट चली थी, उसको जस्टिफाई करने के लिए अगर आप जे स्टोर जैसी पब्लिकेशन पे चले जाएं जहां रिसर्च पेपर्स मिलते हैं, आप कश्मीर और ऐसे कीवर्ड्स अगर आप सर्च करें, तो आपको सैकड़ों सैकड़ों पेपर मिल जाएंगे जो कश्मीर टेररिज्म को जस्टिफाई कर रहे हैं। और एक आध पेपर आपको बड़ी मुश्किल से मिलेगा जो ये बोलेगा कि अरे इसमें तो जिहाद था, इसमें तो लोगों को जो कश्मीरी पंडित थे वहां से निकाल दिया गया। तो हमारे पास तो है ही नहीं ना इंस्टीट्यूशन, हम बोलना भी चाहे तो बोले कहाँ।
Yes, sir.
Can we ask
Yes,
if
yes, right.
anybody else
And
has any other
I would
question?
like to just
Yeah,
add one.
can I make a comment here?
Uh, who's speaking, please?
My name is Mahalingam Balaji.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I think Ashish Darji, I think good to hear your talk. Thank you so much. And I think Rati Hegdeji, I think we have been on common forums where you
Yes.
and me have been the true warriors who have been lone warriors who talk about Brahmins, I guess. So anyway, I
Yes.
think first of all, I think I'll keep it very quick. First is I think I want to say my best wishes to this Global Brahmins Forum, right? So I think it's a good initiative. I think let's all support it. So just one comment there is, since this topic of atrocity literature came, so a few months back, a few people reached out to me saying that my book is in a way an atrocity literature which we have created for the Brahmin community. So I actually didn't view it that way, right? But they other side is looking at so many of our views in from their own perspective, which I think was very interesting. And then they saw that there is also a petition which we are now trying to create on top of that book to do that. And then they said, okay, so you have done all this, but there is one thing which you don't have, which is unity in, to get this something moving. So Ashish, I think that is something which I think we all lack, because for that petition, I would have spoken to more than 5,000 Brahmins, and I have a healthy rate of 2,300 e-signatures. So, whereas the other side goes about consistently with their messaging, and they are also very kind of united that way, right? Whereas that's I think a key issue here. That's the ingredient of a propaganda.
Yes, sir. Like I said, that it is not the question of unity. It is more a question of logistics and to get things organized. We are not organized, and because we are not organized, we find ourselves, trying to do things which seem insurmountable. And when we ask for help and we ask for support,
Yes.
it turns out that there's no one standing behind us. Like that, if it's very common to hear that people say, oh, we don't take to streets like the other side. We don't go and fight our battles on the street. But when I'm a Kashmiri Hindu, and I've several times I've gone to Jantar Mantar and all these places, and we've gathered and we've done whatever we can, and we've also been arrested, put in a lockup, then served chai and samosa, and then left. So all that, this rhetoric that we are not doing much and we are not taking to streets means nothing.
Yes.
I can tell you from experience, it will mean nothing. If you do more than what is allowed, then the state will quickly clamp down on you, because you have no support structure in place. You have no international community, no media outlet supporting you. Everything that we need has to be done from scratch. And unless we have those institutions backing us, we cannot hope to make any difference to whatever cause we want to espouse.
Absolutely, I agree, Shishji, and I think going to the street is a very, very farther step for our community, because even to click a e-petition, which takes 30 seconds, people don't find the time, right? Leave
Even
alone
that is
going
very
into
well organized from the other side, sir. It is very
Yes,
well organized from the other side. You have people who will keep pushing people. Normal people are busy with their daily lives, and it's unreasonable to expect people to just respond to something out of just enthusiasm or activism. And not everyone is an activist. So you have organizations from the other side who will get things done for them. We don't have that.
I'd like to just put forward one point here, that it's time that all of us understood the importance of supporting our dharmacharyas. And I'm not talking about modern gurus. I'm talking about those who have had their pithas for years and centuries together. Please support them first if you want to see a unified action against any, kutark that is being propounded all the time. They are the correct people to oppose all these kind of things. And unless we, help them find a louder voice, we are not going to be gaining anything. People need to understand this simple fact. And somebody has asked how to get the research papers published. Well, good luck to you. I really wish you are able to get any papers published. Please do a proper job of research, and then put it up on your own platforms, whether you put it up on your own website or you put it up on LinkedIn or, Facebook or wherever, and share it through WhatsApp or whatever other way you can share it. For publishing, these days, self-publishing is also there. It's a viable option now. You could try that also. Is there anybody else who wants to ask any question, or can we wrap it up?
I wanted to make a point that since I'm
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you properly. Who is this who's speaking?
Can you turn on your video, everyone?
oh, sorry, I'm not unmuted. Hello, am I audible now?
No. Your audio is not very audible.
Oh, okay. I'm just.
Okay, so we can take other question. Shalji wants to ask question.
Hi, my name is Shalin Durrani. I am Kashmiri Pandit, but I live here in Costa Rica. I know Ashish ji. That's how I got to know about this meeting. I have a couple of questions, but then I would start with ideas rather than questions. Um, we as a community do not know a lot of fundamentals of our own, like why is the Janeo used? What is the difference between a Brahmana and a Shudra? It's in my understanding. I personally think they're both Hindus, they're both Sanatanis, but the only difference is uh, created by the English to divide the society. They have been really successful in it. So um, there was someone who asked me here in Costa Rica about Janeo, about the thread, sacred thread. So I simply told him it's a tool to connect with devas, rishis, and your ancestors, and it should be available to everyone. In olden times, it didn't used to be available because hygiene was the issue, and a Shudra could not wear certain things, or you know, back and forth, all those practical issues. But then my point is, can we by any ways, uh, first we might have to research or something, but can we by any ways propagate things in line to bring everyone together with this just sacred thread? Because this is a right of a Shudra, Vaishya, anyone,
Shaleen,
because
no, Shaleen,
Um,
that is not what it is. That is not at all what it is. It is not meant for everyone. And the uh, who wears a Janeu and who doesn't is prescribed in the Shastras, and it has nothing to do with hygiene. That is a rationalization that people do nowadays. What is written in the Shastras is final and absolute as far as Hindus are concerned, and it may not actually have a scientific explanation a lot of the times.
nothing,
So,
not
yeah,
everything has to have
so
a sign.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. No, nothing. It is not. It is not necessary that everything has a scientific explanation, including the idea of Ishwar or devas, as you said. Deities don't have a scientific explanation. You don't know whether deities exist or not. There is no experiment that can tell you that there is a deity. So science has its limits and it has its own applicability. And to apply science on the Shastra is the original sin of modern Hindus. So we should not do that.
No.
Which
I'm
does
not
not
actually doing that. I'm not.
which does not mean that we deny the Shudras a place in the society. Their place is very well established, and they had their own systems of education. And Janeu for them was often their own Janeu. Some communities have their own Janeu. Some Shudra communities, it is not the Vedika Janeu, but it is a Janeu. Some have turbans, some have shawls, some have other forms and symbols of, let's say, graduation when they finish their education.
Mhm.
So, Janeu, handing over Janeu to everyone is trivializing and caricaturing a sacred act, a sacred ritual. That is not how it is supposed to be. The Janeu is only for the Dvijas being Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. And that act of not giving Shudras the Janeu does not make them inferior. Okay? So I think that much has to
That
be.
makes sense. I am not aware of Shastras, and I don't take science that seriously when we talk about Shastras, because they might take at least 1,000, 2,000 years more to at least reach 10% of Shastras where we are. So
It's
I have.
I'd just like to say one small thing here, Shalji, that this idea of equality based on only certain rituals or based on, wearing a janeu or something, it's a very mistaken idea. That way you cannot have equality anywhere in the world, and it could be,
No,
you know, based
I do
on
not believe in equality. I believe
no,
in
no.
equity.
I do believe in equality.
Equality
Our way of
doesn't
teaching
work.
equality was very different from just the outside rituals. So please don't fall in for that kind of what do you say, explanation about all this, that everybody should wear the Janeu and they would all be equal. No, it's not like that. There's a difference. So
Mhm.
all of us are equal in as far as Atma is
In our
concerned,
own way.
but we live differently and we have to follow the norms of society everywhere in the world. So let's not equate the two like that. That's my
Right.
humble opinion. May I take questions from somebody else? If anybody
Can
else
I
does?
ask a question?
Yeah, please. Please
Um,
speak.
it's for Ashish ji.
Okay.
Like he spoke about.
Yeah, your name. We'd like to just know your name.
Okay, my name is Toshi, and I'm sorry I can't start the video.
No problem.
So, question is, Ashish ji spoke about the four prashad and the importance of doing nitya karmas and stuff like that. So my question is for somebody like me who considers herself a practitioner of the Hindu faith, but honestly I know very little about uh, what I can practice. So could you please tell us a little about the four prashads and how we can like um how like uh, maybe practice it in our daily lives for somebody
So,
who
so,
knows very little.
so yeah, so that's a huge topic in itself. I don't think that I'll be able to do justice to it, but four Purusharthas are the very fundamental is a very fundamental part of the Hindu way of life. It is simply that there are four Purusharthas, that there is Kama, Artha, Dharma, and Moksha, and that you have to fulfill each of them. Especially between the first three, Moksha is, of course, liberation. Between the first three, the most important is, of course, Dharma. And within the boundaries of Dharma, you are free to pursue Artha, which is wealth and power. And within that, it's like concentric circles, going smaller and smaller. And within that Artha and the circle of Artha, you can also fulfill your desires. So if you transgress those boundaries, let's say if you desire more than you can buy, that is common sense that you are actually doing yourself harm. Similarly, following Artha and trying to acquire more wealth than what is dharmic, or what is the right way to do it, moral and in accordance with the Shastra. If you don't do it that way, then also it is going to lead to harm to yourself and to the society at large. So the four Purushartha framework is this in a nutshell, and from this is derived what you are ordained to do as part of your daily life. And it is not necessarily only rituals, but also how you conduct yourself and how you go about living your life, your achar and vyavhar with others, and how you think and how you deal with people. And all that is part of the Dharma Shastra literature. And I think that anyone who wants to get familiarized with these fundamentals of Hindu Dharma, I think a very good start would be the book Hindu Dharma by Shri Chandrasekhar Swamigal, who's the Kanchi Paramacharya, and his book is a great start for getting these concepts right.
Okay, thank you, Ashish.
Welcome.
Can we end this now, Adarshji?
Ji,
I
ji,
think we've taken at least 4-5 questions.
ji, we should.
It's already 10.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us. Do join the Global Brahmin Forum. And let's look forward to another session of this in a few days from now. Thanks everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Rashmi.
Ashish,
Thank you.
for
Thank
joining
you
us.
again.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you for coming.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Adarsh.
others.
Thank you for coming, and thanks to the audience as well. And thank you, Ratiji, for always helping Global Brahmin Organization. And again, we will be back with another enlightened speaker to enlighten us. Till then, please wait and please do your dharma. So thank you.